Welcome to Ohioans Against Extremism Podcast.
Oh my god, that was beautiful.
I've been training for that my whole life.
Okay. Welcome to episode 3 of Ohioans Against Extremism. I'm Maria Bruno.
I am Ainslee Brown.
And today we are joined by 2 guests. We have Ann Anderson and Eileen Galvin. Woo woo woo.
Hello.
And I'm just going to dive right in and immediately ask you guys. Eileen, we'll start with you. You know, who are you and sort of how did you even get into advocacy land?
Wow, immediately asked to explain myself.
Yeah,
Okay.
Can you just justify why you're here?
Validate your existence.
Listen, I've been trying. I've been trying for a long time. So, how did I get... So, I'm Eileen Galvin. I use she, her pronouns. And how I got into this work is I've been queer for a really long time. And in high school, I was involved with trying to start the first GSA we had at our high school. And that was kind of the first moment interacting with systems.
Can you explain what a GSA is? Because it's been mentioned for Tim Walz's campaign stuff, and I don't know that everyone knows what it is.
Absolutely. No, that's a great reminder. It's Gay Straight Alliance, and now that's sort of like it's a term that's not so much used anymore. It's being phased out for things like, Queer Alliance or other things like that. But back in the day, we called it a Gay Straight Alliance, and so in 2006, we tried to start that, and the administration... not to call anybody out, but it was Hilliard City Schools. Grew up in Hilliard, and they've been known for some shenanigans recently as well. But they told us basically, the parents aren't going to like that. We don't want you guys to put a target on your back. And so that was the first moment where it was like, oh, we have to build systems ourselves. You know, we have to disrupt structures that aren't working for us or weren't built with us in mind. So we did that anyway without sponsorship. And then did a lot of work in college, and then I've done some grassroots stuff lived in Columbus my whole life. So a lot of grassroots stuff with basically just like being annoying and showing up to spaces and being like, did anyone think about trans people? Like, that's kind of my role.
Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm Ann Anderson, and I have a transgender daughter who transitioned pretty young. And I live out in Lake County, and it's pretty red, and people just don't seem to understand what it means to be trans, and we see it all over. I mean, and I had to fight so hard for my daughter to have a seat at the table, which led me to get involved in several different organizations. I work with Trans Allies of Ohio, Trans Ohio, Mama Bears. I was just at a Mama Bear retreat this weekend with different moms of queer kids, and we're building a community because we're in dire need of all the community we can get because everything's being taken away. But yeah, so that's me.
So happy to have you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Okay, so the theme of discussion today is going to be essentially how these extremist policies that everyone reads the headlines about, how that actually impacts people. Mm-hmm. And actually we're going to digress for a minute to talk about the election because,
it's important.
Early voting has started.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a few, extremists that are on the ballot and also, in close races. And so we think they're at least worth mentioning. A couple basic election reminders. 1, make sure that you bring a photo identification, specifically a state ID, Ohio state ID or license that is unexpired, or a military ID with a picture unexpired, and also a passport unexpired. Any of those will do, but you do need a physical ID now when you vote in person, even early. Vote early, look up your location, but it's usually your county board of elections. The hours vary by week, but there are a lot of hours. So, get it done now, and then you don't have to worry about it on election day. I'm just going to run through the list. Also, there's election protection hotline for anyone who's having any issue at all.
What kind of issue?
So, someone says that's not the right address on your ID, and so you're not going to be able to vote other than provisionally. The law is that actually the addresses don't have to match. Your state ID license address doesn't have to match your voter registration address. But there will be poll workers that just are mistrained or misunderstand the rule, and they'll turn people away and give them a provisional. And so, if a voter knows that they're supposed to be voting a regular ballot, they could call a hotline. Or maybe it's someone who's at a polling location giving people in line a really hard time, and they just don't even know who to tell. Really anything that comes up that like people run into when they're trying to cast a ballot, that's a thing to report. It's helpful to have a record. It's helpful to know which polling locations have which issues, and it's helpful because then they can follow up with you later. And then of course it's helpful because sometimes we can resolve it really quickly and that person can still cast a ballot. Let's see, any other voting reminders that we need to contemplate?
You can also vote by mail if you have any, barriers with being in spaces with people. It's also really scary time for a lot of people who are going to the polls. So voting early is a great way to avoid that. I do that a lot just to avoid the crowds because it's difficult to be in space with people when you feel like you are under the eyes of a lot of systems and structures that generally don't make you feel safe. So it's another good option.
And the one thing about that is turn it in 10 days before Election Day at least. Give it actual time to get to the polling location. It does take a little time. We've seen increasingly it gets difficult after they come late, so it's just easier if they get there on time. And then also we had episode 2 where we talked a lot about some of the statewide races and why those were significant. So we encourage people to check out episode 2 if they want a deeper dive. And also we have issue 1, which is the anti-gerrymandering provision. Vote for it. It's good. Okay.
Well, not only is it good, but if we don't pass issue 1, it really hinders a lot of the other work that we're doing.
Yes.
If we don't have fair maps, if we don't have a fair playing field, then
The same challenges continue.
Exactly.
Well, to add to that, there's 21 seats up, and only out of the 21 seats, 4 are the only ones that even have a chance of being competitive. So the jury,
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
yeah. So
Yeah, and actually, so that's the next piece, is that not very many of the seats are competitive right now. But hopefully if we had gerrymandering fixed and we had fair maps, that we would have more competitive seats. But this year, there are still some seats that are competitive. And so there are some incumbents specifically that are running in really tight races that we wanted to at least mention, both in the House and the Senate. The first is Jerry Serino, who is our lovely Ann's current state senator, and we're going to dive more into his record in a second. But some of the other ones that I think are noteworthy, all of the following are in districts that are within 6 points of margin, which is Nick Santucci, Steve Demetriou, Andrea White, Gail Manning, Jim Thomas, Bill Romer, Sean Brennan, who's a Democrat, and Rachel Baker, who's a Democrat. So there are several seats that actually are competitive. So if any of those names are your current representative, you actually have an opportunity to either protect someone if you like them currently, or to get them actually out of their seat if you don't.
And just as a little pop-up video aside, when we talk about these races being competitive, we don't necessarily mean that there is a strict battle in the actual district for who people want. We mean that after all the ways in which they have tipped the scales, all the ways in which they have redrawn the maps to give them the highest probability of staying in office, even then, it will only take a couple of votes to get these people out of office, or to keep them in office. And so that is something, when we talk about something being competitive, we don't necessarily mean in like the good old fashioned try hard sense. We mean in that like we still have an opportunity to have our voices heard despite how hard some of the powers that be have worked to silence us.
And I'll also say there are probably 5 names on that list that are, I would put them in the category of, they're not the worst of the worst.
Oh, yeah.
But if you look at their voting record, they're voting alongside the worst of the worst.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's really, like, it comes down to how are you casting your vote when you're in office? And I think when you're talking about incumbents, there's a record to look at. You're not guessing. And you can tell how are they voting, because I actually don't really care how they feel or what they say to my face. I care about what their voting record looks like.
Yeah.
I think that was part of the struggle, like in the last, I mean, and you would know more than me in the past couple of years, is having those conversations and thinking that because I've had a human conversation with a human being and we've reached some level of decency and understanding, and then you turn around and it's time to vote and all that is out the window. That is maddening, but it also just speaks to how tightly our state house is controlled by people that do not represent people of Ohio.
Eileen, were you going to add something?
Just minimal responses, just noises of affirmation.
Ooh, yeah.
I love to be affirmed. Yes.
But thank you for giving me the space.
You're so welcome. Okay, so now that we've gotten through that, we do have Red, Wine, and Blue has a voter guide where they focus specifically on some of the seats that are actually competitive. So if you want more information about who those candidates are, what those races are, Red, Wine, and Blue has a voting guide. It's redwine.blue/Ohio/voting guide/. So we'll also, put that in the comments.
Yeah, like QR code or something.
Yeah. And finally, let's go back to Jerry Serino. We'll talk about policy for a second, and then we're just gonna
Sinister laugh.
as Cam laughs.
My favorite.
Yeah, so Jerry Serino, so he has been the sponsor of a couple bills that have made everyone's life difficult. So we're going to talk about that kind of objective record first. The first are two bills, SB 83 and SB 117. SB 83, also known as the Higher Education Takeover Act, is a gigantic bill that is like everything horrible in one bill. It does everything from bans teachers from being allowed to strike to inserting don't say gay type curriculum bans to prohibiting diversity, equity, and inclusion programming, and has a bunch of other things. It is the quote-unquote get all the quote woke stuff out of schools, but it is horrible, it's horrendous. He's simultaneously pushing a bill, ironically, SB 117, which is to establish right-wing think tanks at public schools. That's literally what it is. And I will just tell you that part of that bill got put into the budget. There are now several of those opening in Ohio. OSU, Toledo, I think Cincinnati has one, a couple others. They're actually in the process of hiring their, lead of that office. They're using public dollars to do it, and they are specifically researching explicitly right-wing agenda policy stuff.
Now, can I ask a question? What is the actual group that's formed within schools? Is this like
it's like a
committee
center?
of
So
the
like how there's
or?
like the John F. Kennedy Center for Leadership or whatever, and like it's like that. It's like a center of leadership kind of. And so like at one point I know some of them are housed at the law school of their school, others are not. And so it varies by institution, but institutions have actually been like left to figure it out. Like they're like, here's all the things that you have to follow, figure out how to do it.
So it's not specified whether or not they need to be actually part of the administration to make decisions for the institution?
So there's something interesting. There's an interesting exception in SB 83.
I'm talking about 117 though.
But this is...
Oh, it's the same.
It
carries over.
It carries over, yeah.
Okay.
Because it creates... And the same time that there's this movement to get rid of DEI programming, divisive concepts and issues, there's an exception for programming that is required as part of a grant requirement. So if you have these think tanks coming in and establishing a presence on campus, eventually, well-funded, because it's the billionaires, remember, that will eventually start offering grants to various departments, those departments will be able to have courses on whatever, clearly crosses the line for divisive concepts and all of the things that we are very, very afraid of becoming mainstream because they don't represent mainstream values. There's a little pathway that allows those to exist, and it sounds like they're already planting the seeds so that when they do pass it, if we can't activate to stop it, they'll be ready to rock and roll as soon as the ledge passes.
It's an interesting theme of the times that we find ourselves in when we are using terms like divisive or inappropriate or political. Then the problem becomes, well, who decides what that means? Yeah. Right? And
it's the guys that have their gerrymandered safe districts.
Exactly.
Yeah, because everyone can agree that inappropriate is inappropriate, but like what is inappropriate? Like Yeah, exactly.
The longer this goes on with Jerry, the worse our county gets. I mean, things are so divided in Lake County that it's getting scary. Honestly, it's getting unsafe, especially for people like my transgender daughter, just to walk down the street. Mm-hmm. I mean, she walks down the street, people are yelling at her. And Rose, which is Jerry's daughter, who's on the Mentor School Board, has been very much a leading part of getting rid of all the DEI and all of trans rights. I mean, she's obsessed. And Buckeye Flame just ran an article about how Mentor was taking down their safe space little stickers. So kids now, they don't want them to even have a safe space. And I know for a fact that the queer kids in the school do look for those safe spaces because a lot of the teachers within our community also are not safe. So they don't feel comfortable going to just anyone. They need to know. So it's pretty scary what's going on with Jerry. And he's just not a likable person. I've met Jerry before.
He's really not.
No.
And his whole caucus on both sides of the Senate and House don't like him, for the record.
Yeah.
Like, I've never heard a good thing said about Jerry. No one's like, oh, great guy, but, like, no one's saying that.
And his family values, he needs to focus on his own family.
Can you talk a little bit about your own advocacy that you've done both at the school board and the state house related to some of these education bills? Because you and I have gotten to know each other because
Yes.
I was at Equality Ohio, and you have hung out with me on a lot of state house hearing days, and you've also been having to deal with this at the local level at the school boards at the same time.
Yes.
So, what's that been like?
The school board's a mess. Even though we have the majority, it's still a mess. My daughter and I were at a school board meeting in the beginning of the summer, June, and we have this woman in our community who attends these school board meetings, does not have a child in the school, but since our school board meetings have become so hostile, she takes it upon herself to show up at these meetings, holding Trump signs, yelling, being disruptive. And she actually had a situation where my daughter was walking into the building and this woman was walking out of the building, and she verbally attacked my daughter in such a way that my daughter's 15 years old. She was talking about her private parts. I mean, she was full on crazy.
Weird. It's weird.
It's very weird. And she had her friend there at the school board meeting from Gays Against Groomers. He was flown in to come to the school board meeting by this woman to make waves at our meeting. And then I was cornered out in the parking lot. When my daughter was having this incident with her, I was still coming into the school, and they came out and approached me, and they were very hostile. Like, I didn't know if they were going to attack me or what was going to happen. But my daughter doesn't feel safe. My daughter doesn't feel safe anymore because they talk about her at every school board meeting. This one woman, I had to leave the school board meeting because she was talking about my daughter, not in general, just about my daughter, saying that I'm sorry you believe that she's your daughter. She's not your daughter. She's your son. Don't tell me who my child is. That's crazy. I would never get involved in someone else's business. And so I had to get a protection order from this woman towards my 15-year-old because she was posting things online. And this woman is a convicted felon who is on OnlyFans, who has her vagina next to my daughter's 15-year-old face. And it's not okay. She put
Wait, what?
Yes, so we'll backtrack there.
It's part for marketing.
Yeah. She was on OnlyFans. She has a following on her OnlyFans, and so she has a paid and Patreon. She has paywalls for things.
Okay.
And while she has that, she also then on her socials, because she has over 30,000 YouTube followers, she has videos of my daughter, and she is showing my daughter's face. She's a minor. She had a video that she put out before the one school board meeting where she did verbally attack my daughter and said, if I end up in a bathroom with a trans person, I carry. She pointed to her gun case and said, fuck around and find out.
That's like 3 out of the 4 check boxes of extremism, like right
Yeah.
there.
And I do just want to very explicitly say, like, this is not a slut-shaming game.
Nope.
Like,
Not at all. No. I'm all for
you
it.
have an
Sex-
OnlyFans.
sex
you have an
work is
OnlyFans.
real work.
Sex work.
is
Love
real
that.
work. That is,
Absolutely.
Your body, your choice. Baby.
Yes, but
And
But the
when you're putting
juxtaposition
someone
Yes,
else's
yes,
very jarring.
15-year-old
Yes.
daughter
That's
on your
wild.
page.
It's wild
that is
market.
Right, right.
It's wild and it's weird.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
Yes.
weird.
Yes.
So
It's really thank you for sharing that story, by the way, because what's so frustrating to me, especially about trans youth, and I repressed for a long time. I did not come out until college for a lot of these reasons. I was in sports, I was a swimmer, and I was like, oh, the thought of doing school sports while being trans, like, no thank you. You know, I have so much respect and admiration for young people who are willing to stand up and be counted and say, yes, I am going to do this because I should be able to. Like, the really frustrating thing is that these kids are being personally called out in meetings with public servants who think that they're protecting children, all the while creating very real barriers for someone to be able to just live their life.
yes.
In the most basic way, walking down the street, leaving the house, using the restroom, being safe at school, and participating in sports.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, sometimes I will joke sometimes, and, you know, this is maybe not the best joke of mine, but I'm like, hey, I don't want to leave the outer belt of 270. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to stay in Columbus because I do feel like where I work, the spaces that I'm in a little bit of like a progressive enclave at times. But these things really get, the battleground really is outside of the 3 C's in Ohio, and it's people on the front lines, often parents and trans youth, who have to fight these really difficult battles. And so thank you for what you're doing, and also I'm sorry that you have to do it, because
Yeah.
it's just like, this should not be
That's
what
how I feel. I don't know
what
how you
people are
don't
spending
fight
their time
everyone.
on.
I would just be walking around just
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's tough.
ending lives.
It's
Like,
it's on Tuesday.
it's on a Tuesday.
But, you know, I'm glad that you brought up the point about, you know, where we're really seeing this hostility, because when we look at Columbus and where it falls nationally on the list of LGBTQ plus friendly cities, we're like top 5, right? And so it's like,
very gay per capita.
listen. I mean, hey, listen.
With the wrist motion.
No, well, I was going for numbers on the couch, but then I decided,
Oh.
that's not my place.
Yeah.
Shout out to my wife. I love you, babe. But, you know, to your point about, you know, growing up in Hilliard, which is it's very close to Columbus. Like, most people that live in Hilliard will say, like, oh, I live in Columbus or greater Columbus area.
Yeah.
But it is, you know, it's not necessarily safe. And as we talk about the infrastructure that's happening in this city, in Cincinnati, and Cleveland, the 3 C's, as we refer to them, there's still real work, real barriers happening literally outside of those city limits. And so it's important to acknowledge those stories as we're talking about our progress, because, like, yes, great, this is wonderful, but this should be the standard across the state. Like, Columbus should not be an anomaly. Like, this conversation, this space that we have should not be one of the few places that exists. This should be happening anywhere in Ohio where people want it to happen.
Yeah, and things are progressing in certain ways. Like, Hilliard now has a non-discrimination ordinance.
Okay.
They have a pride celebration.
All right.
So, you know, since the time that I was in high school there, like, I don't know, whatever that is, almost 20 years ago, things are different. But it's so contentious right now, and it is pulled to the extremes, bringing it back on theme. Yeah, it's bringing it's brought to such extremes that it's like, okay, either we repress or we are in our little progressive enclave,
Yes.
or we are fighting tooth and nail to feel safe to leave the house. It's just a really jarring time.
Well, and I think too, so, you know, you're talking about on the ground in Serena's district, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he comes down to Columbus, and he comes to your stomping grounds, and then he introduces crazy politics that would apply to the whole state.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not just introducing crazy politics that applies to the whole state. He chairs and vice chairs some
Yes.
very
Yeah.
critical committees.
Right.
So
He has a lot of power.
So when we talk about, like, how dangerous this person is, like, yes, Lake County is not a small county. There are a few 100,000 people that live there, but also the policies that this particular person is setting based in extremism, based in hate, based in targeting, they, because of where they sit on some of these committees have the ability to say like what moves, what doesn't, what gets discussed, what doesn't. And so it's not just so much like, hey, here's this person introducing these bad bills, which yes,
he's also the gatekeeper.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we talk about why he's bad, at least, from a policy perspective. Not only is he harming the people in his own community, which in and of itself should be enough to get voted out of office, but he is actively being a barrier to progress all around the state, and that is just not okay.
So that's the beginning of the reasons why Jerry Serino is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And also, there's more reasons. So just to reiterate, we have the opportunity to make Jerry Serino lose his spot at the table altogether.
Yeah.
He is up for re-election November 5th. Go vote. But the other reason is because of the specific...
not for Jerry Serino.
Against Jerry Serino.
Yeah, vote for Katie O'Neill.
Katie O'Neill.
Yes.
And last thing I'll say about SB 83, so that had a huge mobilization in response to that bill. We had broken the record, I think, as far as the number of submissions of opposition testimony against SB 83 when it was being considered in the Senate. And it's so much so that it actually hasn't made it all through the lawmaking process, even though it's been a top priority of Serino. In fact, that activism actually led to some of the provisions in the bill being negotiated out. For example, the part about unions negotiating and striking, that part was being negotiated out of the bill. Serino has essentially said, next time around, we are not negotiating any of it. We're going to do the whole thing point blank, whether that's either in lame duck this year or next year when he gets reelected. So we can literally take one of those possibilities off the table now. By voting for
Katie O'Neill.
There we go.
There we go. And all the other folks who are against some of these people. So, I want to get into campaign rhetoric just for a minute. We have seen a whole lot of anti-trans ads on every screen of our TVs, phone, whatever. It doesn't matter where you're looking, you're seeing anti-trans ads.
Yeah.
Bernie Moreno has sent multiple full-page flyers to my house, to my previous owner, that are specifically dedicated to women's sports. The idea that, just by the way, just my personal rant, the idea that the U.S. Senate campaign would focus most on girls' school sports drives me insane.
As an aside, I did a little digging. You know that the NCAA Women's Basketball Championship was in Cleveland this year. The tournament was in Cleveland this year. You know who didn't bother to show up? Didn't pop out? Cares so much about women's sports. And this was the year of Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, right.
Like, women's sports has never been bigger. And guess who from Ohio?
They don't care about at all.
Was not there.
Sports at all. So their big campaign issue of women's sports is also bullshit, is the theme here. But there's been ads that claim a lot of things, and among them that, kids are going to school and then getting surgeries and coming home, which I think is honestly hilarious. Like,
and
they're just giving you a free $30,000 surgery, outpatient in a day. They don't even let you know.
They don't tell you. Your kid comes home, it's exactly a different kid.
What's happening. It makes total sense. But getting past the fact that it's like...
I love that that's the sticking point.
Yeah, it's like... Well, I mean, hey, when you've been through some of it, you're like...
Sure.
The ignorance is wild, because it's like, I'm just going to have a very invasive medical procedure done.
Just real quick.
And just come home a different gender. Hey.
Do this during your free period,
right,
study hall.
Exactly.
No big deal.
Yes. It's absolutely absurd.
So it's absurd, and we know it's absurd. But the point is that everyone is getting inundated with that. And I have to think that even if people understand it's absurd, that it still has to have a pretty real harm. Yeah. Can you guys talk about just like living in Ohio, experiencing this avalanche of anti-trans ads be thrust upon you?
It's not great.
I don't really watch TV anymore.
No.
It's like...
I can't watch Hulu because they have so many ads. And
I got YouTube Premium just so I didn't have to watch the ads anymore.
And the thing is you know what? I know a lot of the people in the Sherrod Brown ads that are for Bernie Moreno. A lot of them from Lake County. It's Scott Fischel, who's on the Riverside School Board. It's Jacqueline McCormick, who is the president of Lake County Moms for Liberty chapter. These people are in our county. They are friends of Serino's. He knows who to do these ads because they all work together. Yeah. I mean, it's wild to see all the people that live very close to me be on these ads that they don't care about transgender people. They don't give a damn about transgender people. They know what they're betting on is a lot of people don't know someone who's trans, and so they can fearmonger off of the fact that they're coming to get you. What has happened with the trans community? Can someone tell me, please, what the heck has happened to lead us to believe they're coming to get you, or they want to take your spot on a sports team? They're kids. They want to play sports. It's crazy. It's dangerous because there's kids getting there. A month or two ago, there was an incident in our school at Mentor where there was a transgender girl who came in the bathroom and got jumped by 4 girls, and they beat this girl so badly, and she got suspended. The girl got suspended from the school, and then I believe she actually was told to leave the school. So other kids are listening to these ads, and then their parents are talking about them around the kitchen table, and they hear their parents bashing trans people, so it's okay. So they come into school with that attitude, and then the LGBTQ students, especially the trans students, get the brunt end of it. So it's a very scary game that they're playing because someone's going to get killed.
Well, in the recent study that was published that linked trans teenage suicide attempts had risen since the introduction of the anti-trans legislation. I forget whose study that was, but it was but it just came out a couple weeks ago.
Yes, was it?
And I think the thing that is just like
published it?
I think so.
just infuriating is the fact that then they'll say, oh, okay, well, trans kids must just be disturbed, and so they look at them, they're suicidal, they're a mess, you know, they're
We are disturbed, but not the reason you think we are.
Exactly. It's like, no, it's because everyone in the world is threatening their livelihood all the time.
It's because of you.
And tells them that they shouldn't have the right to exist.
Yeah.
That's literally what we are telling them. You cannot exist here, which is
and exist,
wild.
period. Because you know, if your daughter goes into the boys' bathroom, they're not going to be happy about that either.
No.
Yeah.
So the solution is just don't use the bathroom.
Yeah. And so the bathroom bill, it only applies to trans women? Is that how that's going?
It's supposed to apply to
And it applies to
everybody
anyone who's
yes.
Opposite gender.
Yes,
But
as of the birth certificate that you had on or near your birth.
Yes.
So even if you had your birth certificate changed to reflect your true gender.
Oh, they even backstopped it to
Yes.
the original birth. Oh,
Yes.
wow.
And who's going to enforce that? Who's going to say, can you produce a birth certificate
Your
back
original
from...
birth certificate?
Yeah, that's...
And who's checking genitals? Who's checking genitals, by the way? Are you who you say you are? Come on, creepy. That's weird.
Can we talk about, like, can you guys just do your rant about how many people talk about trans people's genitals? Because, like, it's insane to me, but I can only fucking imagine.
It's so weird. It's so weird.
Yeah.
So
How
weird.
does that feel to people?
Not great. Yeah, they, like I said, I've had an incident with this one woman in my community, and she talks about my daughter's genitals like she knows them personally. And it's like, whoa, lady. That's
weird.
In other communities, can you imagine somebody coming up to you and asking you about, how's your vagina doing today? No one does that. No one does that. No.
I mean, to
anybody,
but
but
to a
especially
child, no
to a child.
Yeah.
Or what? Yeah.
A minor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's scary that they even are so emboldened to ask. When people ask, trying to learn things, you can tell there's a big difference.
Yeah.
But when people are coming at you with malice, you know
feel
it.
it. You
Yeah.
can feel it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You can
Yeah.
feel it.
Yeah.
So actually, I want to take a moment to speak to the people that do have questions.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, can we have? I think Aileen was going to add
Oh,
something.
yeah.
Oh, I mean, it wasn't big, but thank you. I was just going to say, you know, gender is this fundamental characteristic that people really seem to flip out about, and they need some deciding factor. And I'm sorry to tell you, Shirley, but gender is complicated, and this is the whole problem, is that it's not chromosomes, it's not what's in your pants, it's certainly not pronouns, like Ben Shapiro would have us believe, that, you know, biology is the nature of the pronoun. I'm sorry, pronouns are not biological.
They're not.
There's no endocrinologist
Made them
studying
shits up.
pronouns. So, like, it's a little arbitrary. I'm sorry to inform you. But the answer certainly is not public genital inspections in the bathroom.
And I think the cruelty of that kind of targeting was a lot more obvious to cisgender people when we had the Olympics incident where there was a cisgender woman being accused of being trans who was
Iman
cisgender.
Khalif, yeah.
And everyone was like, oh my God, this is so cruel. How could any person subject any other person to this? And
That's what you're doing.
I'm sure every trans person was just throwing things at their television because they're like, what do you mean? Like,
Also, no one in the story was trans-identified.
Right.
There were no trans people involved.
No.
And somehow, there weren't even trans people competing this year in the Olympics, which, you know, missed opportunity, kind of wish there were. However, it's like, how did the entire Olympics get derailed to a conversation about trans people playing sports yet again?
How much money have they poured into?
400 million.
I feel like that might be a small part of the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what were you going to ask? Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna ask for those that want to ask questions because they want to grow their understanding, like from a genuine place. And, what are some ways that, on your side, are comfortable for people engaging in those conversations with the experts, which I'm gonna say is you all.
Like, how do people learn about trans people in a way that doesn't feel like tokenizing and like they're like you're being put out for the emotional labor of someone else Googling things, right? Like,
I think I'm just gonna get a T-shirt that says "Please ask me questions about being trans" because I respect the sensitivity with people who are like, well, you know, it is appreciated when it's like, I don't want to ask terribly invasive questions of you when you're trying to go to the grocery store, right? And I'm not going to wear that T-shirt all the time because sometimes I am just trying to go get like chips at the grocery store.
Fair.
That might not be the moment, but like there are lots of people in public spaces and also probably in your own personal network who are willing to talk about their personal experiences or willing to talk about the trans discourse or the fight for our freedom, you know, like I think there are a lot of us who are willing to have the conversation.
Because I even say, like, you know, personal experience, it was something that I won't say I struggled with, but that I kind of wrestled with. One of my very good friends from childhood has transitioned. We lost contact, you know, in some of our formative years, but have now, like, are in some of the same spaces. And so I wanted to be respectful of, you know, who they are today. But also, like, hey, just so you know, like, I'm still the same and I know you're still the same. So how do we cross that bridge, you know, if you were comfortable? And so that was something that I had a lot of conversations with, you know, some trans people about, just because, like, I don't know, and I don't want to be offensive, and I don't want to, you know, burn a bridge or hurt someone's feelings, because I'm genuinely just trying to engage in whatever ways they feel comfortable. So I wanted to ask that question because I know, like, I myself, like, I have the luxury, and I will say luxury, of having people all across all gender spectrums in my life. So I was able to kind of workshop, you know, how to approach that. But for those of you that are interested, are struggling, or trying to figure out, you know, how to be accepting, be safe in this space, you heard what our experts had to say.
Yeah, I would add to that too that nope, lost it.
Okay,
it's okay.
All right, if you catch it again.
I was gonna,
And you can always tell. For me, I can tell right away if they're being genuine. And listen, I have no problem talking about anything to anyone. You can't offend me. But when people, a lot of people just don't understand the trans experience. And I found that out. I didn't understand the trans experience. When my daughter came out to me, well, she didn't come out. She was 3. She's like, I'm a girl. And I was like, oh, okay.
Right.
Well, we're going to have to look into that then. And so I did.
Yeah.
And I educated myself on it. I found the people that I knew I needed to find in order to educate me. Because at the end of the day, she's my child no matter what.
Yeah.
No matter what. I'm going to be there no matter what. And I feel like I had the luxury of her telling me so young, because then it was easier to explain to people at that point, because I was doing the explaining and I didn't want her to have to do it, because I knew that for me it was an uncomfortable conversation at that beginning point, and I didn't want her getting any questions. I mean, she was so young. And so, I mean, obviously people, they did question some things, but she was in a Catholic school. When she was 7 years old, she got thrown out of the Catholic school for being transgender. And I tried to explain to everybody in the school system what what it meant. And I wasn't even asking for any special exceptions at that point. But they were on a witch hunt, and I gave all my free time to the school, everything. I volunteered. They did not care. They just said to me, I got pulled in actually by the Cleveland Diocese, and they told me that he would be welcome back. And I said, well, she's a girl, so that's not happening.
No, he's here.
No, none.
Yeah,
Zero.
So apparently she is not welcome back.
Yes, that's what I see. So I got up and I pretty much told everyone where to go. Well, my husband was like, have a great day, have a great day. And I'm like, let's get the hell out of here. And I slammed the door shut because I've been surrounded by people that are in Sereno's circle forever. His grandchildren that went to school with my children were absolutely awful to my children about my daughter being transgender. Mm-hmm. So Jerry's hate of other people not like him trickles down to his children, his grandchildren, and it just goes on and on. So, yeah, I've been pushing for trans rights ever since my daughter got thrown out when she was 7. So I've been doing this for a little while, and so I saw what was coming down the pipe here. I knew that they were going to be getting crazy. I remember when the pandemic first started happening and we were watching all these school board meetings on like MSNBC and CNN, and you were like, what the hell is happening? Because it turned into something we had never seen before. Yeah. And then now it's happening at our school boards, and it's being really encouraged by these crazy politicians that have a specific agenda. So, yeah.
And I found my thought.
Yeah, dump it on us.
Well, thank you. I was just gonna say that it's the fact that you want to learn more is you don't have to be perfect. You know, like we're all gonna make mistakes. People are trying to understand from not having a basis of understanding, and I think we should do work to encourage people to not do it perfectly at first, Yes. Like, we're going to make mistakes. It's okay. Like, if you talk to me and use the wrong pronouns, it's going to be fine. We will get through it together. Yeah. I'm also trying to dismantle my internalized white supremacy. Mm-hmm. I'm also trying to understand the effects of, like, benefiting from colonialism. Like, we're all swimming in the soup of so many things. And it's such an extreme time. We're so divided that we have to find a way to start easing into a conversation so we can find common ground. And that being said, we also don't have to change everyone's mind.
Yeah.
I think, coming back to extremism, I do not want to change extremists' minds.
Okay.
I want to defeat them.
Legislate.
Okay.
Yes, I want to defeat them.
Very fair. Yeah.
Because our time is not best spent convincing everyone to change their mind. Yes. That's not how progress happens.
I think it's a really important point.
You have to do that triage of like, is this person willing to go there? And if not, I'm going to go on with my day.
Yeah, as you should.
And I think that's why I get, there's the learning with good intentions. And then there's the enabling the bigots by engaging in some of the tropes that they are engaging in. And I think that's where I get really frustrated with Democrats, because it's not an I'm still learning message. No. It's I have concerns too. It folds into all of these unfounded conspiracy theories about trans people. And then they're like, what? Like, sorry, I'm not perfect. It's like, you're not coming at it from a good faith perspective of trying to be a good ally. Mm-hmm. You're trying to have your cake and eat it too, and not get painted with the bigot brush, but also engage in all the same tropes. And we've seen some of the Dem candidates play around in this, and I'm sorry, like, we're going to be just as mad at you, and you are just responsible for the violence that your daughter's experiencing.
Yes.
Because they are engaging in those tropes.
We don't care who you are. We don't like when you target people.
Yeah.
That's what we're against.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to wrap up. Is there anything that either of you didn't get to share that you were kind of like hoping that you got to touch on? I just wanted to make any space for anything.
I just really hope that the candidates that we've seen that have run on these anti-trans issues, they're not winning. So I do keep that in mind, that people are sick and tired of seeing it. Because you have to put it into perspective. What if it was any community. Because listen, it's not going to stop at the trans community.
You're absolutely right.
They're coming for everybody.
You're absolutely right.
So once
Exactly the same tactics they were using against your family as the tactics they use against Haitian immigrants.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And who's next?
100%. So,
There is a next. If we don't stop it, there's always a next.
Yep.
Yeah. I would just add that this election cycle feels so important because things have been normalized so much over time. And so this is really the moment of whether we continue on this same trajectory or if we say this is the moment where all of the weird topics we choose to spend our time on because we don't want to focus on public infrastructure or actually get work done.
Yeah.
Like maybe we should get back to work and not target a small, already beleaguered population, the most vulnerable,
Yes.
because it focus grouped well and we think we can use fear tactics to get our base to vote for us. Can we use a different strategy now? Can we get back to work?
Yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to add is like, it's tough trying to understand if you are still going to live in this state or in this country after an election. Because at some point, when it becomes personal, if you possibly can't use the bathroom anymore or you can't get access to your health care, maybe I don't want to live here anymore. And that's a really tough decision to make. And I just want people to understand that it can be very much abstract when we're talking about trans people. But for the people who live it every day, especially minors that don't have rights generally anyway, because they're minors, right? They're not adults yet. They're the ones who have to deal with all of the impacts of this conversation.
Yeah. I mean, and let's be real. I know that we have a grandfather clause. My daughter was one of the lucky ones who was able to get it. But they're going to take that away. They're going to take everything away. So yeah, I have an appointment for my daughter in a different state, even though she has care here. But you have to have plan A, B, and C, because God forbid that Trump gets elected, nowhere's going to be safe. I don't know if the sanctuary states will even hold up. So
Right, because it's now over, what, like almost half or just about half of states that have healthcare bans for trans youth?
Give
Yes.
some context. So Anne's referring to the healthcare ban that did make it through this year, HB 68. It bans healthcare for trans youth. It has taken effect, which means it has started affecting Ohio families, and that's a perfect example of your rights corresponding with which state you happen to live in, because you all suddenly had to make plans to address that potential loss.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it really, my daughter's very lucky that I will do. There's a lot of people that they can't go out of state. It costs a lot of money to do a lot of these things, and it's not fair. It's not right.
And people that don't have you, a supportive mother who is willing to fight for your child.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I get calls all the time from parents that are just finding out their kids are trans, and I walk them through it's going to be okay, and we're going to get you through it. So yeah. That's why I'm so loud about it. We need more parents absolutely supporting their trans kids. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much to both of you for joining us and talking about this important topic and bearing your very important life experience. But I know that none of this is fun to talk about, and you hopefully one day soon will not have to recite all the terrible reasons that people should just leave you alone.
Well, it's fun to talk about it with both of you.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
You
Thanks
make it
for
a little bit
hanging.
better.
Yes.
Welcome to our group chat.
All right.
Alrighty.
Any other things that you want to add?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
Great.
Save some of the time for next time.
Go vote.
Yes.
Go vote.
Vote today
Vote.
or tomorrow.
And
or-
against Jerry Serino. No on Serino. Rachel would be remiss if we didn't get the slogan one time.
Oh,
no on Serino.
Yes. Yeah, he's got to go. Oh, I do have a thing.
Okay, great.
As we are looking at what education needs, right, as this person sits in this space, I would just like to say that when the last school year started, there were over 60% of the babies were not kindergarten ready. And so if we were talking about pipelines and workforce planning and higher education and all the things that Jerry Serino could be helping us with, we could be
in pre-child.
teaching these babies to read. Because if they can't read, then if they can't read the bathroom sign, guess what, Jerry? So, here's
That's the soundbite.
here's a little,
If they can't read the bathroom sign, guess what, Jerry?
That's amazing.
Just gonna drop that nugget, and then I think we're gonna be out.
Yes, great.
Thanks for joining.
Work.
Well, thank you for listening to Ohioans Against Extremism Podcast. If you want more, you can check us out at ohagainstextremism.org. Follow us on Twitter, No Extremism Ohio. And stay tuned, subscribe, and feel free to donate if your pockets allow it.